Escaped from the insane asylum and all hell broke loose. In 1940, scientist Chris P. Bacon was committed for his bizarre experiments on humans and animals. His ultimate goal was to create a human-like beast with enhanced strength, speed, and regenerative capabilities. Chris was placed in a high-security mental facility after being declared criminally insane in Vermont. 1 year later, in 1941, sirens blared through the asylum's halls. All patients were rushed to their rooms during their weekly group therapy session in the facility's garden. Every patient returned to their room except one, Chris P. Bacon. A state of emergency was declared, as he was considered extremely dangerous. After a month-long search across New England, Chris vanished without a trace. In early 1945, a young couple bought a rustic cabin in rural Maine. The place needed work, but they were thrilled to own a woodland retreat. However, one problem persisted. Strange noises echoed through the walls at night. No matter what they tried, the eerie sounds continued. One night, the noises grew unbearable. Determined to find the source, they began tearing down the walls. As they removed the last board, they uncovered a hidden room. Inside, they found the source of the sounds and immediately called the authorities. What the couple discovered that night would haunt their dreams for years to come. This was the most evil lady that ever lived. In the late 1920s, in the small town of Gloomsville, there was a mysterious woman named Carrie On, who ran a peculiar antique shop at the end of a dimly lit street. Carrie was known for her eerie predictions. If you touched an item in her shop, she would tell you the exact moment your life would change forever. Some believed her, others scoffed. But one thing was certain, her predictions were never wrong. One day, a local journalist named Will Power, known for his skepticism, decided to expose Carrie as a fraud. He entered her shop, touched an old dusty clock, and demanded his prediction. With a chilling smile, Carrie told him, "Tonight at midnight, your time will run out." Will laughed it off, planning to write a scathing article the next day. But as midnight approached, unease settled in. He decided to stay in his office, safe from whatever might happen. As the clock struck 12, the old clock in Carrie's shop began to chime loudly, echoing in Will's ears. Suddenly, he felt a cold breeze and turned to see Carrie standing behind him. "It's time, Will," she whispered. A fierce struggle ensued, with Will trying to escape her grasp, but Carrie was relentless, repeating, "You can't escape your fate." Just as she seemed to have the upper hand, the clock's chime stopped, and Will found himself alone, shaken but unharmed. He rushed to the shop, but Carrie was gone, leaving behind only the ticking clock. Returning to his office, Will thought he was safe, but then a cold whisper filled the room. "Tick-tock, Will. We'll try again tomorrow." This was the real-life Beauty and the Beast, and it ended in tragedy. In 1537, Petrus Gonsalves was born in Tenerife, covered head to toe in thick hair due to hypertrichosis. Dubbed the Wolfman, he was gifted to King Gluteus II of France at age 10. For years, Petrus was treated as a curiosity, gawked at in the royal court. Everything changed when he met Catherine, a nobleman's daughter. She saw past his appearance, falling in love with his gentle soul and intellect. They married in 1563 and had 7 children. Their love faced constant challenges. Lord Thomas Moron, a cruel nobleman, became obsessed with separating them, unable to accept that a beast could be worthy of a beautiful noblewoman. Thomas Moron tried to have Petrus locked away, claiming he was a danger. Petrus, typically gentle, found the courage to stand against Thomas. In a tense confrontation, he eloquently defended his humanity and right to love. His speech moved many at court, temporarily silencing them, but their respite was short-lived. Thomas, humiliated and enraged, plotted his revenge. He spread vicious rumors about Petrus, turning the court against him. One night, Thomas's men ambushed Petrus as he walked alone. Petrus fought bravely to survive and return to his family, but outnumbered and overwhelmed, he fell. With his dying breath, he whispered Catherine's name. This was the real-life.
This was the most evil man in history. In the 1940s, Pine Hill, Tennessee, had an unsettling figure on its outskirts, Jeb Barrow, a wiry man who ran a butcher shop known for its strange, unique cuts. People from nearby towns traveled to buy his meat, even though his shop's walls were lined with hunting trophies and mounted knives that gave the place an eerie air. When people began disappearing, including a traveling salesman and a local hunter, rumors pointed toward Jeb. Witnesses had last seen several of them missing near Jeb's shop, and strange stains were often spotted behind his store. Sheriff Elmer Haskins started investigating, keeping a close eye on Jeb. One night, Elmer saw a faint glow from the shop's cellar and decided to enter the next day under the pretense of a friendly visit. While Jeb briefly left him alone, Sheriff Haskins sneaked into the cellar, finding hooks stained with blood and belongings like watches and wallets, items from the missing townsfolk. The sheriff confronted Jeb, who only grinned and muttered, "There's more where they came from." Jeb was swiftly arrested, and his chilling confession detailed each of his crimes. The townspeople, horrified, refused to discuss him as years passed, but locals say that on cold nights near the old lot, you can still hear the eerie clang of hooks, a chilling reminder of Pine Hill's butcher and the horrors he left behind. This man forced victims to play his evil game. In the 1970s, Robert Hansen, known as the Butcher Baker, moved to Anchorage, Alaska. He quickly became a familiar face in the community, running a popular bakery, but locals couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about him. During this time, the local area was gripped by fear. A series of young women had vanished under disturbing circumstances, but despite increased police patrols, no leads or suspects emerged. On the evening of May 26, 1982, Hansen visited a local nightclub where he met Sue Luna, a 23-year-old exotic dancer. He offered her a high-paying photo shoot gig, which was too good to decline. Hours later, Sue found herself being driven miles into the Alaskan wilderness. She was uneasy, but Hansen's friendly demeanor kept her calm. Eventually, they stopped in the middle of nowhere. In a twisted game, Hansen released Sue into the wilderness, giving her time to escape. He pursued her like prey, using his hunting skills to track her. The forest was hard to run through, but Sue pushed on as fast as she could. Hansen moved with practiced ease, closing the distance. As night fell, the forest grew dark and hostile. Sue leaned against a tree as her legs burned with exhaustion. Suddenly, she heard footsteps approaching from behind. Terrified, Sue spun around to find Hansen aiming at her. Screams echoed through the vast Alaskan landscape as she became another victim of Hansen's evil game. This was the real-life Hunger Games. During the early 1900s, this was the true story of Aladdin and his genie, and it was truly terrifying. In 1945, this is the true story of the nun. The Vatican has kept the severed head of a possessed nun for over 300 years. In 1742, a nun named Josephine Rosenthal appeared mysteriously pregnant. Despite her insistence that she hadn't been with a man, the convent grew suspicious. Tests confirmed that Josephine was still a virgin, and her pregnancy was deemed a divine case. However, tragedy struck when she died giving birth to a baby girl, Maria Rosenthal. Maria was born a hermaphrodite, and her condition led to whispers of demonic origins. Nuns and priests began to torment her, viewing her existence as a curse. The church soon devised a horrific plan to sacrifice Maria at the age of 33, the same age as Jesus, hoping to mask the deed as divine intervention. When Maria learned of the plot, she chose to take her own life. After her death, the priests ordered her head to be severed and embalmed in a box with a cross. But Maria's death didn't bring peace. Soon after, she began appearing in paranormal visions, haunting the very convent that condemned her. This is the true story of the nun. This incestuous family took the lives of over 1,000 people. This is the true story of Wrong Turn. In the 16th century, a man named Sawney Bean decided to run away with his girlfriend to the shores of Galloway County in Scotland, where he began living in a cave, surviving by stealing food and belongings from passing tourists. Sawney Bean and his wife had children with whom they committed incest. This family began to grow, as they all had relationships with each other. Sawney Bean's clan grew to 48 people, and what they stole was no longer enough to eat. The Bean family began to take the lives of people who passed near their cave, and then eat them. For 25 years, this family survived doing this savage activity, until one day a couple was attacked by the Bean family, but the man managed to defend himself with a gun, but his wife did not survive. The man had discovered the cave of the Bean clan, so he decided to report it to the authorities. After that, the soldiers of the King of Scotland went to the cave where they captured the whole family, and then they were condemned to be burned at the stake. This incestuous family. This was the most evil barber that ever lived. In 1962, a quiet town in Black Hollow, Tennessee, newbie friend Emmett Vale opened a small barbershop on Main Street. Polite and well-groomed, Emmett quickly became a favorite in town, offering discounted haircuts and a listening ear. But soon, his clients began behaving strangely. Martha, a widow, wandered at night toward the abandoned Black Hollow mine, claiming her deceased husband called her there. Jack, a young boy, saw visions of his abusive father stalking him, and Lucy, a teenage girl, insisted her own shadow was out to get her. Every night, these haunted individuals would be found, trance-like, heading toward the dark, desolate mine. One night, Jack Jack's sister, Clara, decided to investigate Emmett's shop. In a hidden room, she found photographs of his clients' terrified faces. They roamed the town, breaking into homes and causing havoc. By morning, over 25 people had been injured in the chaos, and authorities managed to capture 3 of the 4 turtles. The incident led to the exposure of the secret lab, and those responsible faced serious charges. Years later, townsfolk began reporting sightings of the missing turtle, describing it as over 7 feet tall and eerily human in appearance. To this day, this is the only photograph ever taken of the creature. This was the real. The song Crazy Train is based off this man. During the 1800s, a man named Mo D. Lawn worked as a train conductor and would travel across the country on the railroad. But during the late 1870s, unspeakable crimes started to occur where homes would be broken into and victims would be found hit by a sledgehammer. At the time, the police were not aware that this was actually happening all across the country, but in the year 1879, the Appleby family would randomly awake to a window in their home being broken, and when the father of the home went downstairs to investigate, he came face to face with a man holding a sledgehammer and would attempt to protect his family. Miraculously, he survived the attack and witnessed the man run out the back door and get onto a train that was connected to the railway behind his home. After the police were informed of this, they were able to figure out that the person causing these crimes was a train conductor. The police eventually would create a task force to try and catch him and would station officers at random homes along the railway system across the country. After a few months of doing this, he eventually broke into one of the stationed homes, but the officers were unable to arrest him on the spot. But eventually, officers were able to spot the train in transit and would chase him on horseback almost a full day, trying to make him surrender. After hours of avoiding officers, Mo decided to change course and got on to closed tracks. After a few minutes, he came up to a bridge that was only halfway completed, and before he could react, the train flew off the tracks and fell a few hundred feet below into the water. But when officers got down to the wreckage, Mo was nowhere to be found. The song Crazy Train. If you answer phone call from this man, it's over for you. In 1978, residents of Hollow Brook, Wyoming, began receiving chilling phone calls after midnight. Each caller claimed to be a long-dead loved one, whispering intimate details only the deceased could know. The phenomenon terrified the small community, and local authorities launched an investigation. All leads pointed to Victor Price, an unassuming repairman often spotted near the victims' homes. When questioned, Victor calmly stated, "I don't make the calls, I just connect them." That night, every officer involved in the case received a call from their own departed loved ones. Shaken to their cores, they abandoned the station by dawn, leaving Victor locked in his cell. When they returned, he was gone. In his place was an unplugged rotary phone, the receiver hanging off the hook. Hollow Brook declared an emergency, urging residents to disconnect their phones. But even today, some claim to hear faint ringing in the dead of night. Those who answer often find themselves gone by morning. Rumors persist that the calls now come from beyond the grave, victims themselves trying to warn the next one. The phone's curse lives on, unanswered. If you answer phone call from This was the real-life Ratatouille, and it's truly horrifying. In 1962 Paris, there was a chef named Stu Pidasso, whose dishes were praised as masterpieces. But what no one knew was Stu Pidasso had a secret sous chef, a rat, named Remy. Unlike the animated tale, this wasn't a heartwarming partnership. Stu had been obsessed with cooking perfection, and after accidentally discovering that Remy could mimic his movements, he enslaved the rat. Day and night, Stu trapped Remy inside a small cage, forcing him to create flawless dishes while taking all the credit. The deeper Stu fell into madness, the darker his methods became. He began experimenting, feeding Remy ingredients that pushed the boundaries of decency, even using unsavory parts from local butcher shops. Over time, Stu's conscience deteriorated, and Remy's once bright eyes grew dull with despair. In his final act of cruelty, Stu planned the ultimate dish that would shock the world, a dish made from his greatest secret. The last thing anyone tasted from Stu's kitchen was the unmistakable flavor of despair. After his sudden disappearance, only a note remained: "Genius deserves a sacrifice." This man was the real-life Shrek. In the 1890s, in the quiet town of Sunny City, Florida, Meyer Michaels was an enigmatic figure, known for his intimidating demeanor. Despite selling onions at a stand, his meager earnings barely sustained him. One fateful night in 1894, 3 men plundered his home, leaving him penniless and leading to his eviction. Desperate for a fresh start, Meyer joined a traveling circus, captivated by a poster that promised adventure, and pay. As the circus strongman, he lifted heavy objects on stage, gaining fame as he journeyed across the globe. Almost 2 decades later, weary of the circus life and feeling underpaid, Meyer decided to leave. In 1912, he found new employment as a boiler room worker on the luxurious Titanic, a job he cherished, expressing a desire to continue indefinitely. Tragically, on April 14, 1912, the Titanic struck an iceberg and sank. Meyer Michaels became one of the ill-fated victims. It has been rumored that Meyer actually saved many lives by breaking a jammed door in the boiler room before the tragic sinking. What this man did to his wives was truly horrifying. In 1975, a man named Mark S. Mann had a shop where he made lifelike dolls and sold them for a living. Wealthy women would flock to his shop, enchanted by his charm. They'd fall in love, and they would marry, but then they'd disappear. His workshop in the basement held 8 glass cases, with 8 beautiful dolls in them. One day, he managed to persuade a woman named Chloe Noah-Lott to be his newest wife. 3 days after their marriage, Chloe noticed something the others didn't. The dolls weren't just wearing wedding dresses, they were wearing his missing wife's actual wedding dresses. In his diary, she found his darkest secret. He wasn't just making dolls that looked like his wives, he was turning his wives into dolls. The process took exactly 13 days. The screams lasted for 12. Chloe managed to call and inform the police about her twisted husband, but when police raided his workshop, they found his final project unfinished. A doll with Chloe's face, only half transformed. But Chloe had left him a gift too: handcuffs. Now, Mark rots in prison, surrounded by blank-faced mannequins, and his dolls are in police storage. The last thing he had to say was, "I love beautiful women, but I love them more when they are quiet." What this man did to his wife. This man was the real-life Grinch. In the winter of 1964, the remote mountain town of Frosthaven was plagued by a series of bizarre robberies. Gifts, decorations, and even entire Christmas trees vanished overnight, leaving families distraught and fearful. The culprit was revealed to be Chris Masheter, a reclusive hermit who lived atop Mount Hollow. Locals described him as a twisted old man with an obsessive hatred for joy and merriment, rumored to mutter curses about happiness under his breath. One night, he descended into town dressed in a red Santa suit, sneaking into homes to steal more. But things took a dark turn when he was caught by a young boy named Timmy. Instead of running, Chris kidnapped Timmy and returned to his lair, sparking panic across Frosthaven. Search parties scoured the mountain, but found only scraps of fabric and Timmy's abandoned teddy bear near a jagged cliffside. Some claim to hear strange laughter echoing from the peaks late at night. Though the town moved on, Frosthaven's residents whisper that on cold Christmas nights, you can still see the flicker of Chris's lantern moving through the dark, looking for more victims to rob Christmas, his shadow visible in the distance. This man was This is the tragic story of the real Popeye. Donnie Piper, known by his comrades as the true Popeye the Sailor, was stationed at Pearl Harbor in 1941. With a tough demeanor and a heart cherished by his companions, Donnie was responsible for catching fish to feed the hungry men of the Navy. He had his own small boat, where he often enjoyed a can of spinach, his secret source of strength, which he swore made him unstoppable. On that fateful December day, as Donnie was peacefully eating his spinach, he noticed a squadron of planes flying low over his boat. Recognizing the danger, he quickly lit his cigar and began throwing cans of spinach at the propellers of the enemy planes. His precise aim brought down 3 planes into the water, their pilots defeated by this unexpected counterattack, which left his comrades in awe of his bravery. But in the midst of Donnie's heroic efforts, tragedy struck. A torpedo hit his boat, causing the brave sailor to disappear along with his beloved vessel, leaving behind only the memories of his courage and selflessness, which would live on forever. This is the tragic story. Why is this side of history never talked about? During the 1800s, a man named Hugh Mongoose was born in Armadillo, Texas. He would grow up there, but by the age of 10, he was already bigger than every adult male in the town. Over the next few years, he got so big that people would travel from across the state to just get a look at him. The mayor of the town saw an opportunity to make money with this and asked Hugh to make a show out of it. He agreed, and over the next few years, the town's economy flourished with visitors coming from across the country and buying tickets to the show. But Hugh grew tired of the act and told the mayor he was retiring. The mayor was furious about this and told Hugh he is making a huge mistake. So one night the mayor gathered up all the officers, so they can arrest and prevent Hugh from leaving. After this, Hugh spent his days tied up in the front of the town and was like a zoo exhibit for everyone to see. He would spend months in that spot until one night an officer named Jake Farms secretly released him. Hugh thanked the officer but warned him he should probably leave town because it's about to get ugly up in here. Hugh then proceeded to start destroying the town building by building and save the mayor's house for last. When he approached, he could see the mayor looking out the window staring at him, and without hesitation, he stomped on his house with him in it. Why is... Do not get in the elevator with this man. During the 1950s in Springfield, Ohio, there was a giant hotel called the Katz Hotel. Even though the building itself was big, it would only have around 10 rooms booked a night on average. But at this hotel, there was a bellhop named Tom Morrow who helped guests bring luggage to their room. In the year 1959, a businessman named Kay Bull booked a room, and it was on one of the upper floors of the hotel. When Kay entered the elevator, Tom was already in it, and he never said a word throughout the whole process. But when they reached the room, Tom stuck out his hand like he wanted a tip, but Kay said, "Sorry, I would, but I don't have any cash on me." Tom showed zero emotion and just walked away. That night while Kay was sleeping, he realized his room was uncomfortably hot and decided to go down to the lobby and complain. But when he was heading down the elevator, it passed the first floor and went to the basement. When the doors opened, all he could see was darkness, and when he attempted to go back up, the elevator wouldn't work. So he decided he would walk into the dark basement and find the emergency staircase. But while he was walking, he heard a whisper behind his ear say, "You should have tipped. Do not get in the elevator. Don't you dare watch this tape." In 1994, a VHS tape labeled "Watch Me" began circulating at garage sales across the Midwest. Those who played the tape were greeted by a bizarre montage of unrelated scenes: a man eating soup in reverse, a clock spinning wildly, and a shadowy figure pointing directly at the screen. Soon after watching, people reported strange occurrences, hearing footsteps when they were alone, finding objects in places they didn't leave them, or seeing their own reflections smiling when they weren't. Each person who watched the tape also reported the same nightmare: a man standing at the foot of their bed, whispering, "Watch me again." One woman claimed her phone began ringing every night at 3:07 a.m., the only sound being the faint ticking of a clock. Another reported the shadowy figure from the tape standing outside her window, motionless, for hours. The tape always seemed to reappear at another garage sale, no matter how many times it was destroyed. Rumor has it that anyone who watches it too many times vanishes, becoming part of the tape itself. Those who've dared to watch the tape more than once say they can hear faint whispers in the background. Join us. Watch forever. Don't you dare watch. This man caused an entire state to go into lockdown. In 2003, a man named Ben Doberman went on trial for the disappearances of over 52 people in Washington state from 1974 to 2002. Ben, who was described as being over 7 feet tall, but weighing only 140 pounds, was often seen walking along the highway late at night, dressed in a suit. Many well-meaning drivers would pull over to offer him a ride, unaware of his dark intentions. In 2002, however, a truck driver accidentally struck the towering man and drove off, not realizing what had happened. The next morning, Ben was arrested after seeking medical care for his injuries at a nearby hospital. Due to growing suspicions and evidence tying him to the string of disappearances, Ben was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Yet, in 2009, during a routine morning roll call, the guards discovered that Ben was missing from his cell and nowhere to be found in the entire prison. It wasn't until they inspected behind his Scooby-Doo poster that they realized what had happened. The prison warden immediately contacted the governor of Washington, leading to a statewide lockdown. This man caused an entire... The real Willy Wonka had a very dark secret. Tonka Yahari, a highly successful entrepreneur in the early 1900s, owned a chocolate factory in Philadelphia. All his workers were kids, as he preferred cheap labor. Known for being stingy with his money, Tonka offered tours of his factory, but tourists who participated in these visits mysteriously disappeared. Over 200 people vanished during these tours, never to be seen again. Due to the wealth and economic power Tonka brought to the city, no one dared to speak up out of fear. That changed changed when a group of 4 friends decided to take a tour of the chocolate factory. Charlie Quinn, Joseph Catalini, Murray James, and Salvador Volcano. During the guided tour led by Tonka Yahari, the 4 friends began to feel an unsettling vibe about the factory owner. At the end of the tour, they arrived at a chocolate waterfall. The group dared Joseph to push Tonka into the waterfall as a harmless prank. After being pushed, Tonka drowned, and the police were called. When Tonka's body was recovered, it had already transformed into a frozen chocolate statue. In an attempt to save him, doctors used a hammer to break through the chocolate layer. The real Willy Wonka.
This was the real-life Jigsaw, and it's truly horrifying. In 1984, John Spilsbury, a wealthy businessman, vanished without a trace. But when police searched his mansion, they uncovered something far more sinister. His home was filled with sadistic traps, spiked walls, poisoned locks, and floors rigged to collapse into pits of sharpened metal. Investigators found disturbing journals where John described his twisted obsession, testing people's will to survive by forcing them into deadly games. Over the next decade, 5 victims were discovered, each enduring unimaginable horror before their deaths. One man was forced to solve a puzzle while his body slowly burned from the inside. Another woman had to choose between cutting off her own arm or being crushed alive. Every victim was given a brutal choice: endure excruciating pain or die a horrifying death. Police suspected John Spilsbury, but they could never prove it. He was gone, like a ghost. But here's the part that will haunt you. Rumors say he's still out there hiding in the shadows, setting new traps, watching and waiting for his next victim. Could you survive the real-life Jigsaw's deadly game? This man ate 300 burgers in one day, and it ended horribly. In 1983, a man named Chewy Beefus walked into a small-town McDonald's and placed an order that stunned everyone: 300 burgers. The workers thought it was a joke at first, but Chewy wasn't laughing. He paid up front, pulled out a chair, and started eating, burger after burger. Rumors spread. Locals crowded around the windows, watching him devour the food at an unnatural pace. His eyes grew darker, and his skin paler, but he kept eating. Some said they saw his jaw unhinge like a snake's. After he ate the 300th burger, something strange happened. He got up and went to the bathroom. Strange noises came from the bathroom, and out of nowhere, dirty water started coming out under the door. He had clogged the bathrooms. All the other customers started running out of the restaurant. Only the manager remained, and when he went inside, Chewy was gone. The manager found his receipt on the floor, and in there was written he is still hungry. To this day, no one knows what happened to Chewy or what he did in the bathroom. This woman is not as innocent as she looks, and went. One summer day, Dickens set his twisted plan into motion. He tampered with the town's only radio tower, broadcasting a high-pitched frequency that only he could withstand. By noon, people started screaming in agony. Their ears bursted, and soon, nearly 250 people were left deaf by the end of the day. When police found Dickens in his home, he sat at his desk, surrounded by radios, listening to the deadly sound. He smiled as they arrested him and said, "The silence is beautiful, isn't it?" Later, investigators found journals filled with drawings of ears and notes such as, "If they won't give me silence, I will give it to them." The town never recovered, and locals say, on quiet nights, you can still hear the faint hum of that deadly sound. This was the real-life Shrek, and his story will make you cry. In the 1950s, there was a man known as Morris Tillett, a reclusive farmer who lived deep in the marshlands of Louisiana. Locals would whisper about his terrifying appearance, with a face deformed by a condition called acromegaly. His grotesque looks earned him the cruel nickname Shrek. People avoided his land, believing he was a monster. But Maurice wasn't the monster they made him out to be. He was hiding a secret. One night, a group of curious teens ventured into his swamp, hoping to catch a glimpse of the ogre. They never returned home. Panic swept the town, and a mob stormed his land with torches, determined to end the reign of the swamp beast. But when they broke into his shack, they didn't find the creature they expected. Instead, they discovered a small child locked in a room, one of the missing teens. The real monster wasn't Maurice. It was the local sheriff, named Don Key, who had been using Morris's terrifying reputation to cover up his own dark crimes. The twist? Maurice had been saving kids one by one and hiding them from the real predator. And just like that, the monster was gone. No one saw Maurice again. He left the town, leaving the people to wonder if the true Shrek was still out there, protecting the innocent. This was the real. This evil lawyer killed his own clients. In the 1960s, in the small town of Borington, Indiana, there was a lawyer named Gol Sudman who had never lost a case. But what no one knew was the dark secret behind his success. His clients always walked free, but they would mysteriously vanish days after the trial. One day, a desperate widow named Anita Bath came to him, pleading for help after her husband was wrongfully accused of murder. Gol took the case. She sold everything she owned to pay him, trusting he would save her family. But after Gol won the case, her husband disappeared. It turns out Gol wasn't just defending his clients. He was using their cases as sacrifices to a twisted deal he made with someone or something darker. Every time he won, an innocent soul vanished. Sure, they didn't go to prison, but they vanished. When the woman complained to Gol and asked where her husband is, he said, "You asked me to save your husband from prison by any means possible, and I have done that, but your husband is gone." 3 years later, the woman finally came out and reported her husband as missing, but the lawyer was nowhere to be found. Investigators came to the conclusion that the clients were either dead or sent out of the country, being used as slaves by the people Gol made deals with, the same people who would make sure he wins every case. This evil lawyer, this American woman, was pure evil. In 1953, in the small town of Boomersville, Florida, Anita Deck was the perfect housewife, super pretty and with a warm smile for everyone in the neighborhood. But Anita hid a dark secret. 6 of her previous husbands disappeared without a trace. Still, no one dared question Anita. One night, her new husband, Frank, noticed something strange. Anita never ate at dinner. She always pretended to eat her food, but as Frank grew suspicious, he discovered her hidden diary, revealing a chilling truth. Anita wasn't just killing her husbands, she was feeding their remains to the guests at her famous dinner parties. Frank tried to escape, but it was too late. That night, the doorbell rang for another dinner party, and Anita greeted her guests with her usual smile. As they sat down to eat, Anita leaned in and whispered to Frank, "Don't worry, darling, you're next." At that moment, Frank found the bathroom as an excuse to finally escape. He managed to reach the police station and inform them of what was going on. Once the police got there, the house was empty, but when the police searched the basement, the story was much darker than they knew. This American woman was pure. Why are they hiding this evil part of history? In the 1950s, in the deep hills of Arizona, there was a young woman named Rosemary. She lived with her sick mother named Abigail Marsh in a crumbling old house. Rosemary was super tall and had a condition that made her look like a mummy. The townspeople feared her. One day her mother's health took a turn for the worse, and she passed out. Rosemary quickly called the local doctor, Dr. Rick O'Shea, crying and making weird noises as she couldn't talk. The doctor happened to know them and managed to get to the house quickly, but by the time he was there, Rosemary's mother was already gone. Dr. O'Shea tried everything to revive her, but it was too late. He broke the news to Rosemary, but she refused to believe him. In her eyes, the doctor had failed her. Worse, she believed he was the reason for her passing. As the doctor tried to leave, she cornered him. She didn't use words, just raw, terrifying strength. The townspeople would later find his car abandoned outside, but the doctor was never seen again. Days later, the people of the area noticed something strange. Rosemary was seen wandering the streets wearing the doctor's white coat. She walked with a creepy smile into the forest, never to be seen again. Why are they hiding this evil part of history? This ice cream shop owner's secret ingredient was truly disturbing. Hugh Mungus was the owner of a very successful ice cream shop called the Sugar Rush in Miami during the 1980s. He was a local celebrity in the area, even appearing in a Bee Gees music video. Everyone loved him, and his famous saying, which was "My milkshakes brings all the boys to the yard." For some reason, there was just something about his ice cream that would always leave you wanting more. Many of his customers would come by several times a day, every single day. When people would ask why his ice cream was so good, he would always say, "It's my secret ingredient." One day, a local food inspector would come into the shop in disguise and order just a basic ice cream cone for a reasonable price of $69. He really enjoyed the ice cream, but didn't understand the hype surrounding it. The inspector would go home that night and go to bed, but would quickly be awoken by a severe craving of ice cream. The craving was so bad that he drove to the ice cream shop at 3 in the morning even though they were closed. When he arrived at the Sugar Rush, he would quickly see the ice cream shop owner in the back alley of the shop next to the dumpster with a suspicious man. At this point, the food inspector was undetected by the two men until his tummy started gurgling, causing Hugh Mungus and the suspicious man to stare directly at him. This ice cream shop owner's secret ingredient was How did this woman massacre her entire town? In 1951, the small town of Willow Creek, Ohio was a friendly place where everyone knew each other. One evening, a massive power outage plunged the entire town into darkness. As the rain poured down, families started lighting candles and waiting for the electricity to return. At the center of town lived Ella Veta, the town's friendly seamstress, making dresses for every family in town. Ella was known for her kindness and warm smile, but no one knew what she was really hiding. As the blackout dragged on, strange things started to happen. Houses were found with their doors wide open, and entire families disappeared without a trace. Panic spread through the town, but with no power, no one could call for help. When the lights finally flickered back on the next morning, the gruesome truth was revealed. Across the town, over 250 bodies were discovered in their homes, each one brutally butchered. Ella was sitting quietly in her small kitchen, stitching together pieces of fabric. But this fabric wasn't made of cloth, it was made of skin. When police arrived, Ella was calm. She uttered just one chilling sentence: "I was just finishing my masterpiece." How did this woman massacre? This salon owner was pure evil. In 1947, in the town of Intercourse, Pennsylvania, a woman named Anita Pounding opened a salon named Beauty Magic that promised women unmatched beauty. Every woman who left her salon looked stunning, attracting every man they wanted. But soon, people noticed something strange. The women who visited Anita's salon seemed to age rapidly, their beauty fading faster than it came. Some of them even fell ill. The town was in shock. How could these women, once so vibrant, now look so frail and drained? Anita wasn't just offering beauty treatments, she was stealing their youth. Using a secret formula, she extracted the vitality from her clients and made them look super old after just 1 week. She used this tactic to make the women come back to her every week and spend more money. As she was the only person who had the cure, the women would come back week after week. No one realized that Anita had been slowly draining them to make herself rich. By the time anyone figured it out, it was too late. She vanished, leaving behind a trail of women who paid the ultimate price for fleeting beauty. This salon owner was pure.
This entire class of students vanished, and you will be shocked at what happened to them. In 1963, at St. Vincent's High School, the morning started like any other, with history lesson in room 303. But halfway through the lesson, the teacher, Mr. Walker, stepped out for a moment. When he returned, every single student was gone. The police were called, and an intense investigation began. Desks were left untouched, backpacks on the floor, as if the students had simply evaporated. Some said they ran away, others believed a kidnapper was involved. But there was no sign of a struggle, and the classroom windows remained locked from the inside. A few days later, the janitor, an old man named Frank, came forward. He said he had found something disturbing in the basement, a set of old, dusty textbooks, identical to the ones the missing students used, only dated 1913. Inside, there were names written on the covers, the names of the missing kids, and next to each name, the word returned. The school records revealed that a class of 30 students had vanished 50 years earlier, in 1913. They were never found. Were they from the past and traveled to the future, and now somehow traveled back to the past? What do you think happened? This entire class of students. This American doctor was so evil, it will make you sick. In 1952, Orphan City, Florida, there was a doctor named Al Bieback who was known as a brilliant surgeon, but he had a dark obsession. He believed he could unlock the secret to immortality. He found a patient, a young man with no family, who had weeks left to live. The experiment began. Dr. Bieback injected a compound into the man's heart and waited. Days passed, and the patient didn't die. He seemed to stabilize. The doctor was happy. Until the patient began to speak. "You've trapped me. I'm still dying, but I can't die." The patient wasn't immortal. He was stuck in a limbo between life and death, unable to heal, unable to die. His body remained alive, but his mind was in agony. As the patient screamed in endless torment, Al realized his dream of immortality had become a nightmare. Some days later, one of the nurses named Anita Mann realized what Al was doing and reported to the police. Once they arrived, the doctor took his own life, and the last thing he said was, "I shall go, but I will be reborn much stronger." But that didn't really happen. He was laid to rest the same day. This American doctor was so
This was the real-life Aladdin and Genie, and it was truly horrifying. In 1945, in Shreveport, Louisiana, a rich man named Alaric Danver gained a strange reputation. He could grant people's deepest wishes. Most people who came to him asked for money, and Alaric always delivered. They'd find their bank accounts full, but soon, something awful would happen. Slowly, their loved ones and family members began to disappear one by one. One day, a boy named Jimmy Neutron, who didn't care about money, asked Alaric to make him fly. Alaric, intrigued by the boy's wish, agreed. He created a pair of mechanical wings and strapped them to Jimmy's back. But as he jumped, the wings failed, and Jimmy plummeted to the ground. Alaric stood by, watching with a grin. This incident caused a public uproar, and the police raided his mansion. But what they found in his big basement was pure horror. It turns out he kidnapped the family members and made them work in gold mines, which would allow him to grant wishes for people. But when the police tried to arrest him, he said, "Genie weenie, take my beanie, I'm gone like Houdini," and disappeared forever. This was the real-life Aladdin and Genie.
This American woman killed 300 people in one.
Historical photos that will give you chill.
What this man did to his wives was truly horrifying. In 1975, a man named Mark S. Mann had a shop where he made lifelike dolls and sold them for a living. Wealthy women would flock to his shop, enchanted by his charm. They'd fall in love, and they would marry, but then they'd disappear. His workshop in the basement held 8 glass cases with 8 beautiful dolls in them. One day, he managed to persuade a woman named Chloe Noalot to be his newest wife. 3 days after their marriage, Chloe noticed something the others didn't. The dolls weren't just wearing wedding dresses, they were wearing his missing wives' actual wedding dresses. In his diary, she found his darkest secret. He wasn't just making dolls that looked like his wives, he was turning his wives into dolls. The process took exactly 13 days. The screams lasted for 12. Chloe managed to call and inform the police about her twisted husband, but when police raided his workshop, they found his final project unfinished. A doll with Chloe's face, only half transformed. But Chloe had left him a gift too, handcuffs.